Well, it's kind of so far so good. The Queen is going to continue working while she isolates this week after testing positive for COVID. The palace has said that she is showing mild cold-like symptoms.
However, if the 95-year-old monarch was forced to suspend official duties because of illness, 2 or more councillors of state can act on her behalf. And currently, those councillors include Prince Charles, Prince William, but also Prince Harry, who, of course, is currently living in America, and Prince Andrew. Well, joining us to discuss this in the studio is royal commentator Emily Andrews and royal biographer Hugo Vickers, who joins us from Wiltshire. Very good morning to you both.
Morning.
Emily, how concerned are we about the Queen? I mean, if we think back 2 years at the beginning of the pandemic, if the Queen had contracted COVID then we'd be in a panic. It feels like we've progressed enough that the palace is able to announce it and say it's all right. Not only does she have mild symptoms, she's actually going to carry on working. Keep calm, carry on, no panic at all.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the Queen's mantra and has been throughout all of her life. Keep calm, carry on, don't panic the horses. I don't think we need to be too worried. It is mild symptoms. I think when you read the very bare lines that you get from Buckingham Palace press releases, you have to have a degree, I sometimes think, in palaceology to actually interpret what they mean. Mild symptoms, well, they're telling us, don't worry, she is OK, cold-like symptoms, fine. Working from home, she's still taking those red boxes every day. Poor Queen, she doesn't get a day off even when she's got COVID. So she's still getting her paperwork, still signing things, but she is in isolation. But you're right, Susanna. I mean, I think, you know, the Queen has compared this pandemic and everything that we've all had to live through to surviving the Blitz and the Second World War. And I think by anyone's assessment, she's had a good war. If she had contracted COVID 2 years ago, pre all the vaccines, I think we might be in a very, very different situation, possibly with a different monarch.
Well, she has been triple jabbed, hasn't she? I think we know that. Hugo, you've actually had COVID. You're happy to admit that you're 70. Admit, there's a pejorative word. How was it for you at 70 having COVID?
Well, this is the reassuring thing. It was very mild. I mean, I just felt slightly muzzy for one day. And when I began to feel better, I tested positive for 3 days, then negative, and I isolated for 12 days because I just thought that was a good thing to do. So that's the encouraging thing. But of course, the Queen is much older than I am. And so it's obviously more worrying. But if she has the same thing as I had, then there's very little concern indeed.
Well, let's talk about what Susanna raised at the top of the item here, about these councillors of state. There are 4 of them, and we've named them. If the Queen did need to sit back for a while, if she did get poorly, not possibly with this, but with something else, this has raised the question that Prince Andrew and Prince Harry are still formally councillors who would step in and take over her role and offer advice. Do we trust any advice from Prince Andrew, let alone Harry, who's out in California, you know, on his Netflix deal? I mean, what have they got to do with the affairs of state anymore? And how competent would we expect Prince Andrew to be, given that he's shown stunning incompetence for the last 2 or 3 years, let alone the last 2 or 3 years?
Well, if the monarch is unable to perform her duties, it used to be 6 councillors of state. It used to be the Queen Mother and Prince Philip. Well, they're no longer around. So as you rightly say, it's the next 4 in line of succession, and 2 of them act as a quorum. So obviously it would be Prince Charles and Prince William. Prince Harry is automatically excluded because he's living abroad. And I do agree with you that if Prince Andrew is undertaking no royal duties whatsoever, it's ludicrous to suggest that he might be a councillor of state. So at some stage, they probably ought to address that, in which case the next person, in theory, would be Princess Beatrice, who would be perfectly capable of being a councillor of state. They don't have to do very much, but there are certain things that they can't do. I mean, but they just keep the business of monarchy going, if you see what I mean, in the absence of the monarch, either abroad or through illness.
It beggars belief that Prince Andrew is still formally, officially, as we speak this morning, a councillor of state. It beggars belief, doesn't it?
I know, absolutely. And just to pick up on what Hugo said, it is this kind of ancient succession law that dictates who is councillor of state.
Because what Hugo didn't say, the name he didn't mention, was Princess Anne.
Exactly. Wouldn't she be amazing? We want her to be one of the 4 councillors of state rather than Harry and Andrew. But the reason she isn't at the moment is because she was born a woman, even though she was born after Charles, the succession goes Charles, Andrew, Edward, and then Anne. And so the councillors of state are those people over the age of 21 who are in the succession. So obviously Prince George, Charlotte and Louis are too young. They are obviously above Harry and Andrew in the line of succession.
Hugo, when the Queen gets ill, and thankfully, mercifully, it appears she's very, very mildly ill, you know, we're all reassured by that. But of course it brings to mind the unmentionable. And clearly, when we're discussing her inability, potentially, to undertake her duties, and the fact that there are two people in that list who could take over, who would not be able to take over, Prince Andrew and Prince Harry, it feels like this is a time when some serious thought must be going into changes, you know, should and when the worst eventually happens.
No, but it's very easily done because there was a Regency Act in 1937 and another one in 1953, and all they need to do is to take it to Parliament and push it through very quickly, and they can change it. And indeed, yeah, I mean, I agree with Emily. You could easily have Princess Anne. And, I mean, she was eligible as a Councillor of State when she was younger anyway. You could do that. They can do anything they like. But at the moment, you only need a quorum of 2. So it's all very well for you to say Prince Andrew is a Councillor of State. He is not a Councillor of State at the moment, and he would only become one in the list if you know, a Council of State was needed, if they needed councillors to operate.
Emily,
and the two would be Prince Charles and Prince William.
Yeah. Emily, Prince Charles himself is having a spot of bother at the moment, of course, with the issue around the foundation. Yes,
cash for honours scandal. I mean, it hasn't been a great week for the monarchy last week. We had, obviously, the settlement, Andrew's settlement with Virginia Giuffre. We've had the cash for honours scandal with Charles and, obviously, the Queen having COVID. I think the cash for honours scandal is very serious for Charles. He is saying that it was his right-hand man, Michael Fawcett, who was in charge of the Prince's Foundation. He was the one who wrote the letter to the Saudi billionaire to effectively say, we will support your knighthood and we will support your application for British residency. I mean, if it looks bad and it smells bad, often it is bad. And, you know, cash for access, you know, one would say that the monarchy has been guilty of that throughout the last 2,000 years. But of course now, you know, now one just can't do that. I mean, Prince Charles has done amazing things up at Dumfries House in Scotland. I've been there, it's amazing. And the local people are just so thankful for him. It's completely regenerated the area. But he does run it like a medieval fiefdom. It is like a medieval fiefdom. He is the local laird who is bestowing the largesse on the locals. That's great, but where is the money coming from? You cannot act in the 21st century as you did 200 years ago.
Just quickly finish with you, Hugo. Look into your crystal ball, if you would. When the inevitable does happen and the Queen passes on, she will have left behind an extraordinary personal legacy. One of the reasons that the monarchy, I suspect, is still a going concern is because of her. She hasn't put a foot wrong in her entire reign, let alone before it. Charles has put his foot in it from time to time. The royal family has got scars and bruises on it from all of those beneath the Queen. What sort of relationship do you think this country will have with the royal family when she's gone? It'll change dramatically, won't it?
Well, it will change dramatically, and we are actually, I've often thought, living at the tail end of a golden age. And I hope that this summer, you know, we'll celebrate the Queen and this remarkable achievement of 70 years of, as you say, not putting a foot wrong and a wonderful reign. But I also think it's quite interesting that people become slightly different. When Edward VII succeeded Queen Victoria, he had been considered to be a rather dissolute Prince of Wales, and he was an absolutely admirable king. And when Charles becomes king, he will become a slightly different person. Now, if you don't accept that immediately, look at what happened with Camilla. She was literally the hated mistress up until the day she married Prince Charles, and then suddenly she became the supportive wife, and that has gone on continually. So I think the answer really is that we will have to give the new king an enormous amount of support and hope that he has an interesting reign. I mean, he will come to the throne better qualified than any of his predecessors, and you know, like the Queen, he stretches right back into history. I mean, he met Churchill and Eisenhower and de Gaulle and Nixon and all sorts of people. You know, he brings a lot with him. So, you know, watch this space.
He'll keep calm and carry on. All right, Hugo, thank you very much indeed. Emily, thank you.